My name is Nathan Pierce, and I've been the overnight host at WFRZ 94.3 FM in northern Maine for the better part of 11 years. The station sits on a hill about 40 miles outside Caribou, surrounded by dense pine forest and accessible only by a single winding road that becomes treacherous the moment winter sets in. I took this job fresh out of broadcasting school because I love the isolation, the intimacy of speaking into the void at 3 a.m, knowing that somewhere out there, insomniacs and long-haul drivers were listening to my voice as their only companion through the darkness. Christmas Eve, 2019 started like any other shift. I arrived at the station around 10:30 in the evening, my Toyota, struggling through 8 inches of fresh powder that had fallen since sunset. The forecast called for a major nor'easter to roll in after midnight, the kind that drops 3 feet in 12 hours and shuts down everything for days. I'd packed enough food and water for a week, along with spare blankets and a camping stove. The station had a generator, but I'd learned years ago to prepare for the worst. Being stranded up here wasn't just inconvenient, it could be deadly. The building itself was a relic from the 1960s, all cinder block and industrial carpet, with ancient acoustic foam peeling from the walls of the broadcast booth. The equipment was a hodgepodge of different eras. We had a digital mixing board from 2005 sitting next to turntables from the Carter administration. The transmitter hummed in its climate-controlled room like something alive, and sometimes when I was alone in the dead hours, I'd swear I could hear it breathing in rhythm with my own lungs. I relieved Marcus, the evening host, at 11 sharp. He was bundled in his parka before I'd even set my bag down, eager to get home before the roads became impassable. We exchanged the usual pleasantries, and he mentioned that call volume had been light all evening. People were hunkered down with family, he figured, preparing for Christmas morning. I nodded, locked the door behind him, and settled into my chair as his tail lights disappeared down the hill. The format for overnight was simple: classic rock, some folk, a few deep cuts that you'd never hear during daylight hours. I opened the phones at midnight for anyone who wanted to dedicate a song or just talk. Most nights, I'd get maybe 5 or 6 calls in a 6-hour shift. Lonely people mostly, elderly folks who couldn't sleep, occasionally someone working a night shift at a hospital or factory. I treated everyone with respect, gave them a few minutes of human connection, then played their requested song. It was honest work, and I took pride in it. At 11:47 p.m., I queued up "Tangled Up in Blue" by Bob Dylan and took a sip of coffee from the thermos I'd brought. Outside, through the booth's single window, snow was beginning to fall harder. The flakes were the size of quarters, drifting down through the cone of yellow light, cast by the parking lot's single sodium lamp. The forest beyond was an impenetrable wall of black. No moon, no stars, just the snow and the darkness and the hum of the transmitter. The request line rang at 12:03 a.m. I let Dylan finish his verse, then brought up the caller. "WFRZ, you're on with Nathan. Merry Christmas Eve." There was a pause, long enough that I almost disconnected, thinking it was dead air. Then a voice came through. Male, middle-aged, maybe. Calm in a way that felt rehearsed. "Hello, Nathan. Thank you for taking my call." "Of course. What can I play for you tonight?" Another pause. I could hear something in the background of his line, not quite static, more like wind or breathing. It was hard to pinpoint. "I don't want a song, Nathan. I want to tell you something." I'd dealt with weird callers before. It came with the territory. "All right, friend, what's on your mind?" "You're going to die tonight, before the sun comes up on Christmas morning. I wanted you to know how." My finger hovered over the disconnect button. This kind of thing happened maybe once or twice a year. Some drunk trying to be edgy, or a kid thinking he's funny. I kept my voice level. "That's quite a statement. You feeling okay out there?" "I'm not joking, Nathan, And I'm not threatening you. I'm simply informing you. There's a difference. Something in his tone made me hesitate. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't mocking. It was clinical, like a doctor delivering a diagnosis. "Who is this?" I asked. "That's not relevant. What's relevant is that in approximately 5 hours and 42 minutes, you will walk out of that station into the snow. You'll make it about 30 yards toward your car before you collapse. Hypothermia will set in within minutes. They won't find your body until December 27th, after the storm passes. You'll be buried under 4 feet of snow, frozen solid, with your keys still in your hand." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "Listen, I don't know what kind of game this is. Not a game, a fact. I'm calling to inform you because you deserve to know. You've been kind to people over the years, Nathan. You've given comfort to strangers. I thought you should have the courtesy of awareness. Who the hell are you?" "Check the caller ID," he said. "You'll find it interesting." I glanced at the console screen. The number displayed was the station's own main line, not the request line, the published number that rang through to the front desk, which was unmanned after 6 p.m. "How are you calling from this number?" I asked. "Because I'm here, Nathan, in the building. I've been here for hours." My heart kicked hard against my ribs. I spun in my chair, looking through the booth's interior window into the dark hallway beyond. Nothing. Just shadows and the green glow of the exit sign over the back door. "Bullshit," I said. "I locked the door when Marcus left. I'm alone." "You locked the front door. You didn't check the equipment room. The door back there doesn't latch properly. It hasn't for 3 years. You walk past it every night and never notice." He was right. The equipment room door was old, warped from humidity. It stuck in the summer and never quite closed flush in the winter. I'd made a mental note to mention it to the station manager 100 times, and always forgot. "I'm going to hang up now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And then I'm going to call the police." "You're welcome to try, but the phone lines will be down in 11 minutes. The storm. It's worse than the forecast predicted, and your cell phone won't have signal. It never does up here when the weather turns. You know that." I did know that. The hill was a dead zone for mobile service, even on clear days. I kept my phone charged as a flashlight backup, nothing more. "What do you want?" I asked. "I don't want anything, Nathan. I'm simply delivering information. You have until 5:45 a.m. What you do with that time is your choice. If I'm going to die outside, I just won't go outside. Problem solved." "You will, though. That's the interesting part. You'll have a reason, a compelling one. You won't be able to ignore it." "And what reason is that?" "I don't want to spoil the surprise," he said. And there was something that might have been a smile in his voice. "But I will give you one piece of advice. Don't trust what you see, and don't trust what you hear. The storm does strange things to perception. You'll understand soon enough." The line went dead. I sat there for a full 10 seconds, my hand trembling slightly as I lowered the phone. Then I grabbed my cell from my bag and checked it. No bars. I tried the station's landline, picking up the desk phone in the corner of the booth. Dead silence. No dial tone. He'd been right about that too. I forced myself to breathe slowly. Think rationally. This was a prank. Had to be. Someone who knew the station's layout, who'd maybe worked here before. Marcus had a dark sense of humor. Maybe he'd doubled back, or had a friend help him. But even as I tried to convince myself, I knew it didn't fit. Marcus had been genuinely eager to get home. And the caller's voice hadn't been familiar. It had been wrong. Like it was coming from somewhere far away, even though he claimed to be in the building. I stood and walked to the booth door, opening it slowly. The hallway stretched in both directions, lit by flickering fluorescent tubes that hummed with electrical tension. To my left was the front entrance and the break room. To my right, the hallway led past the station manager's office, the bathroom, and ended at the equipment room where the transmitter lived. I grabbed the heavy Maglite flashlight we kept for power outages and started down the right-hand corridor. My footsteps sounded too loud on the tile floor. I passed the manager's office, dark and locked, past the bathroom, empty. Reached the equipment, room door. It was open, just a crack, maybe 2 inches. The interior was black. I pushed it wider with the flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness to illuminate the transmitter, the breaker panel, the shelves of spare parts and cables. The room was long and narrow, with a small window high on the far wall. Snow pressed against the glass from outside, reducing the ambient light to almost nothing. The room was empty. No one hiding behind the transmitter. No one crouched in the corners. I checked every possible space, even the utility closet within the equipment room. Nothing. But the door had been open, and the caller had known about it. I wedged a folding chair against the door to keep it shut, then returned to the booth. My hands were steadier now. Adrenaline had given way to a kind of focused calm. I had 5 hours until the time he'd mentioned. 5 hours to figure out what was happening and how to respond. I went back on air at 12:28 a.m., queuing up Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. While it played, I went through the station security footage. We had 3 cameras, one on the front door, one on the parking lot, one in the hallway. The system was old, the video quality grainy, but it was something. I rewound to 10:30 p.m. when I'd arrived. Watched myself unlock the front door and step inside. Watched Marcus leave 10 minutes later. Fast-forwarded through the evening. No one else entered through the front. The parking lot camera showed my Toyota and nothing else, gradually disappearing under accumulating snow. The hallway camera showed me walking back and forth between the booth and the break room. No one else. No anomalies. I checked the timestamp on the request line call log. 12:03 a.m. The caller ID had indeed shown the station's main number, but the call duration was listed as 7 minutes and 34 seconds, which felt too long. I remembered the conversation, and it couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 minutes. I replayed it in my head, trying to account for the discrepancy. I couldn't. At 1:15 a.m., I made coffee and tried to think through the logic. If someone was in the building, they'd have to have entered before I arrived, or through some entrance I didn't know about. The building had been here since 1967. Maybe there was an old basement access, some forgotten door, but I'd worked here for 11 years. I'd explored every corner during slow shifts. There was nothing, unless I'd missed something. I took the flashlight and started a systematic search. I checked every room, every closet, every window, all locked or latched from the inside. The back door, the one emergency exit, had an alarm bar that would trigger if opened. It hadn't been touched. I even checked the crawlspace access in the ceiling of the hallway. Undisturbed. By 2 a.m., I was back in the booth, playing Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd, and staring at the phone. Part of me wanted it to ring again. Part of me dreaded it. It rang at 2:17 a.m. I let it go 4 rings before answering. WFRZ. Hello again, Nathan. The same voice, the same unnerving calm. I searched the building, I said. You're not here. I told you not to trust what you see. Did you consider that I might not be here in the way you understand presence? So what are you, a ghost? Does it matter? The outcome is the same. The outcome is that I stay inside until morning and nothing happens. You're welcome to try. But you will go outside, Nathan. You'll have to. Something will make it necessary. What could possibly... Do you hear it yet? He interrupted. Hear what? The scratching. I went silent, listened. Over the hum of the transmitter and the whisper of the ventilation system, I heard nothing unusual. I don't hear anything. You will. It starts in the walls, soft at first, like branches scraping against the exterior. But then it gets louder, closer, and you'll realize it's not coming from outside. It's coming from inside the walls, something moving between the spaces, something that knows you're here. This is bullshit, I said, but my voice wavered. You'll hear it soon, and when you do, you'll start to wonder what happens if it finds a way through. What happens if the walls aren't as solid as you think? That's when you'll consider leaving. That's when the idea of going to your car, of driving away, will start to seem rational, even necessary. I can wait until morning. I have supplies. You won't want to stay, Nathan. Not once you hear it. Not once you realize what it means. And what does it mean? That you were never alone up here. Not tonight. Not any night. You've just never been paying attention. The line went dead again. I set the phone down carefully and forced myself to keep breathing. This was psychological warfare. Someone trying to get in my head, make me panic. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I played Tom Petty, then the Eagles, then Fleetwood Mac. Normal rotation, normal programming. I read the weather updates on the teleprompter, warned listeners about the storm, advised everyone to stay home and stay safe. My voice sounded professional, controlled. No one listening would have known anything was wrong. At 3:03 a.m., I heard it. A scratching sound. Faint, rhythmic, coming from somewhere behind the booth's back wall. I muted the microphone and stood, pressing my ear to the wall. The scratching continued. It sounded like fingernails on drywall, or maybe something sharper. Metal on plaster. It moved slowly from left to right, then back again. Deliberate, purposeful. I grabbed the flashlight and went into the hallway. The sound was louder out here. I traced it to the wall between the booth and the manager's office. It was definitely coming from inside the wall cavity. But what could make that sound? A rat? Maybe. But the rhythm was too consistent, too intentional. I went to the equipment room, grabbed a screwdriver, and returned to the hallway. I pressed the tip against the wall, where the sound seemed loudest, and listened. The scratching stopped. Silence. I waited 30 seconds, a minute, nothing. Then it started again. But this time, it was coming from a different location. 15 feet down the hall, near the bathroom. I walked toward it, and again it stopped the moment I got close. It was moving, responding to me. I returned to the booth and closed the door, locked it. The scratching was audible, even through the door now, circling the room like something was pacing the perimeter just beyond the walls. I sat in my chair and tried to focus on the music, the routine. I played requests from the log that had come in earlier in the day. I did the station identification at the top of the hour. I pretended everything was normal. At 3:44 a.m., the lights flickered. It was brief, just a half-second dip in power, but it sent a jolt of fear through me. If the generator failed, I'd be in complete darkness, except for the flashlight. And the flashlight had maybe an hour of battery life left. The scratching intensified. It was coming from multiple locations now. The walls, the ceiling, even the floor. It sounded like a dozen hands clawing at the surfaces, trying to find a weak point, trying to get in. I turned the studio monitors up loud, drowning out the sound with Stairway to Heaven. 8 minutes of music. 8 minutes where I didn't have to think about what was happening. When the song ended, the scratching had stopped. The silence was worse. I sat in that silence for 10 minutes, my heart pounding, waiting for the phone to ring. It didn't. The building was utterly quiet, except for the hum of the transmitter and the moan of wind outside as the storm reached its peak. At 4:12 a.m., I saw movement in the hallway, just a flicker at the edge of my vision, visible through the booth's interior window. I turned to look directly, and there was nothing, but I knew I'd seen something, a shadow, a shape, there for a fraction of a second, then gone. I picked up the flashlight and aimed it through the window. The beam illuminated the empty hallway. Nothing unusual. I moved the light slowly from left to right, checking every corner. Then I saw it. A door at the far end of the hall. A door that shouldn't exist. I'd walked past that wall 1,000 times. It was blank, solid, just cinder block and paint, and a framed photo of the station's founding staff from 1967. But now there was a door. Wooden, old-fashioned, with a tarnished brass knob. It was slightly ajar, darkness visible through the gap. I stared at it for a full minute, trying to reconcile what I was seeing. It wasn't possible. Doors don't just appear. But there it was, as real as anything else in the building. The phone rang. I grabbed it without thinking. "What is that door?" "The way down," the voice said. "You're curious, aren't you? You want to know what's behind it." "There is no door. I'm hallucinating. You put something in the air, some kind of gas. No drugs, Nathan, no tricks. The door has always been there. You've just never had reason to see it." "That doesn't make sense." "Very little does tonight. But here's what you need to understand. That door leads to a place you don't want to go. And if you don't leave the building soon, something is going to come through it. Something that's been waiting for a very long time." "Waiting for what?" "For someone to notice. For someone to pay attention. You've been broadcasting into the void for 11 years, Nathan. Did you ever wonder if something might broadcast back?" I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. "What are you talking about?" "The transmitter. You send your signal out into the darkness every night, and most nights nothing answers. But sometimes, under certain conditions, something hears. And it responds. It finds the source. It follows the signal home." "That's insane." "Is it? You're alone on a hill in the middle of nowhere, sending electromagnetic waves into the atmosphere 24 hours a day. Do you really think nothing notices? Do you really think you're shouting into an empty room?" I'm hanging up. "The door is opening, Nathan. Look." I looked. Through the booth window, I saw the door at the end of the hall swing slowly inward. The darkness beyond was absolute, not the darkness of an unlit room. Something deeper, something that swallowed the flashlight beam when I aimed it in that direction. And something was moving in that darkness. I couldn't see it clearly, but I could see the way it displaced the space around it, like watching something underwater distort the light above. "You have two choices," the voice said. "You can stay and meet what comes through that door, or you can go outside, get in your car, and try to drive away." "You said if I go outside, I'll die." "Yes, hypothermia. But it's quick, peaceful even. You'll fall asleep in the snow. What comes through that door is neither quick nor peaceful. You'll be conscious for much longer, and aware. This is a false choice. You're trying to force me out. I'm giving you options. That's more than most people get." "Why? Why are you doing this?" There was a pause. For the first time, the voice sounded almost sad. "Because it's my job. Someone has to make the calls. Someone has to inform the chosen. I don't make the rules, Nathan. I just deliver the message." "Chosen for what?" "To answer for the signal. Every transmission is a prayer, whether you know it or not. And eventually, prayers are answered." The thing in the darkness was getting closer. I could see its outline now, or at least the space where light refused to go. It moved without sound, gliding across the hallway floor like oil spreading across water. I stood, grabbed my coat and keys, and made a decision. I'd rather face the cold than whatever that was. I'd take my chances with the storm. "Smart choice," the voice said, though I hadn't spoken. Then the line went dead for the last time. I unlocked the booth door and stepped into the hallway. The shape in the darkness stopped moving. It seemed to be watching me, though it had nothing I could identify as eyes. I turned away and ran for the front entrance. The door was frozen shut. Ice had formed in the frame, sealing it completely. I pulled hard, my breath fogging in air that had grown suddenly colder. Behind me, I heard something that might have been footsteps, or might have been the building settling, or might have been something else entirely. I gave up on the front door and ran for the back exit. The alarm bar was frozen too, but I slammed into it with my shoulder and it gave way with a crack of breaking ice. The door flew open and I stumbled out into the storm. The cold hit me like a physical blow. The temperature had dropped to what felt like 20 below, and the wind was a living thing, tearing at my coat and stealing the breath from my lungs. Snow was falling so thick I could barely see 3 feet ahead. The parking lot lights were out, either from the storm or something else. I pushed forward toward where I'd parked my car. My feet sank into snow that was already past my knees. Each step was a battle. The wind disoriented me, spinning me around until I wasn't sure which direction I was facing. I stopped and tried to get my bearings. The station building was behind me, a dark mass barely visible through the curtain of snow. My car should be directly ahead, maybe 20 yards. I could make it. I had to make it. I took another step and my foot hit something solid. I looked down but couldn't see through the snow. I knelt and brushed at the powder with my gloved hands. Metal. A bumper. I'd found my car. I worked my way along the side of the vehicle to the driver's door and tried to fit the key in the lock. My hands were already numb, clumsy. The key scraped against the door, missing the lock. I tried again. Missed again. Behind me, I heard something that wasn't the wind. I turned. Through the swirling snow, I saw a figure standing near the station's back door. Tall. Too tall. Its proportions were wrong, like someone had stretched a human shadow vertically until it was 8 or 9 feet high. It didn't move, just stood there, watching. I got the key in the lock and turned. The door opened. I practically fell into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut, hitting the lock button immediately. My hands were shaking so badly, it took 3 tries to get the key in the ignition. The engine turned over. Once, twice, died. I looked up. The figure was closer. It had crossed half the distance between the building and my car, without appearing to move, like it had simply existed in one spot and then another with no transition between. I turned the key again. The engine coughed, sputtered, caught. The headlights came on, illuminating the wall of snow ahead. I put the car in reverse and pressed the gas. The wheels spun uselessly. I was stuck. The figure was beside the car now. This close, I could see that it wasn't solid. It was more like a distortion in the air, a place where reality bent around something that shouldn't be there. Where the headlights hit it, the light curved and dimmed, as if being absorbed. It placed what might have been a hand against the driver's side window. The glass didn't break. Instead, it began to frost over from the point of contact, ice crystals spreading in fractal patterns. But these patterns weren't random. They formed shapes, images. I saw myself in the ice, saw my own face rendered in frozen detail, saw my expression of fear. And beneath that image, I saw myself again, and again. Layers upon layers, like looking into parallel mirrors. Each image showed me in a different moment, different versions, different choices. In one, I was still in the booth, and something was standing behind me. In another, I was running through the snow, and I was already falling. In another, I was back in the hallway, and the door at the end was fully open. The images multiplied faster than I could process them, showing me 1,000 different outcomes, all of them ending the same way, all of them ending with me gone, erased, not dead exactly, but absent, like I'd been edited out of the world. The frost covered the entire window now, then spread to the windshield. In seconds, every window of the car was opaque with ice. The interior temperature dropped so fast, I could see my breath condensing into tiny crystals. The steering wheel burned my hands with cold, even through my gloves. I couldn't see out, couldn't see the figure. But I could feel it, a presence that pressed against the car from all sides, patient and inexorable. This was it. This was how it ended. Not with hypothermia, like the caller had said. Not with me collapsed in the snow. But here, trapped in my car, while something wearing the shape of absence unmade me piece by piece. I closed my eyes and waited. Time passed. I don't know how long. Long enough for the fear to fade into a kind of numb acceptance. Long enough for the cold to stop hurting and start feeling almost warm. I knew what that meant. My body was shutting down, conserving what little heat remained for the core organs. Soon, I'd stop shivering. Soon, I'd start feeling sleepy. The final stages. But then something changed. The pressure against the car lessened. The temperature, while still brutally cold, stopped its free fall. I opened my eyes and saw that the frost on the windows had begun to recede. Slowly, millimeter by millimeter, the ice was melting from the center outward. Through the clearing glass, I saw dawn. Not the storm-shrouded gray twilight I expected, but actual dawn. Pink and orange light breaking through thinning clouds, illuminating a landscape transformed. The snow had stopped. The wind had died. Everything was still and quiet and covered in a blanket of pristine white. The figure was gone. I sat there for another 10 minutes, afraid to move, afraid to believe I was still alive. Finally, I tried the ignition again. The engine started immediately. I put the car in reverse, and this time the wheels found traction. I backed out of the parking spot, turned, and began the slow crawl down the hill toward the main road. I didn't look back at the station, didn't want to see if that impossible door was still there, or if something was watching from the windows. It took me 4 hours to make the drive home, the roads buried under 3 feet of snow. The radio stations were all reporting the storm as a historic event. Power was out across half the state. The nor'easter had stalled over Maine and dumped snow for 16 straight hours. When I finally pulled into my driveway, my wife ran out to meet me. She'd been terrified, she said. She'd tried to call the station a dozen times and gotten nothing but dead lines. She'd called the police, but they'd said no one could get up the hill until the roads were cleared. She thought I might be dead. I held her and told her I was fine. Told her it had been a long night, but I was okay. I didn't mention the calls, didn't mention the scratching, or the door, or the thing in the storm. What would be the point? Who would believe it? I took a week off. When I went back to the station, I made a thorough inspection before my shift. The equipment room door was warped, just like always. The walls were solid. The hallway ended in a blank wall with a photo of the founding staff. No door of any kind. Everything was exactly as it had always been. I asked the station manager if anyone else had reported anything strange on Christmas Eve. He said no. The evening host had gone home at 11. The morning host had come in at 6 a.m. on Christmas Day and found everything normal. The transmitter had run through the night without interruption, the automated system playing the scheduled programming. But there was no recording of my shift. The digital logs showed a gap from 11:47 p.m. on December 24th to 6:02 a.m. on December 25th. 6 hours of dead air, which should have been impossible with the automation backup. It was as if I hadn't been there at all. I tried to find records of the calls. Nothing in the system. No caller ID logs for those hours. No evidence they'd ever come through. I told myself I'd imagined it. Stress, isolation, the storm. The mind plays tricks. But I knew better. 3 months later, in March, I was doing some research for a documentary segment on the station's history. In a box of old files in the manager's office, I found a newspaper clipping from December 1979. The headline read, "Radio host found dead after Christmas storm." The host's name was Michael Carver. He'd worked the overnight shift at WFRZ. On Christmas Eve, 1979, a major storm had hit. Michael had stayed at the station. His body was found 3 days later when the roads were cleared. Cause of death, hypothermia. He'd been discovered 30 yards from the station entrance, keys in hand, buried under snow. The article included a detail that stopped my breath. In the weeks before his death, Michael had reported receiving strange calls during his overnight shift. Calls that seemed to predict future events, calls that came from inside the building. The station manager at the time had dismissed it as stress or pranks. I kept digging, found more articles, more records. Michael Carver wasn't the first. In 1991, a woman named Susan Trask, same shift, same storm conditions, same outcome. In 2003, a man named David Orr. Every 12 to 16 years, going back to the station's founding. All on Christmas Eve, all during major storms, all overnight hosts. I requested a transfer to daytime programming. The station manager approved it without question. I think he knew. I think they all knew, everyone who'd worked there long enough. They just didn't talk about it. I still work at WFRZ, but I'm on the air from noon to 6 p.m. now. I go home every night to my wife, my warm bed, my normal life. I don't take overnight shifts. I don't work holidays. And I never, under any circumstances, answer the phone after midnight. Because I know what's waiting on the other end of that line. I know that somewhere, in the dark spaces between frequencies, something is listening to our broadcasts. Something that hears every word, every song, every signal we send out into the void. And sometimes, when the conditions are right, when a storm cuts us off from the rest of the world, it reaches back, it chooses someone, marks them, and makes a call. I don't know why I survived when the others didn't. Maybe I made different choices. Maybe I was lucky. Or maybe my time just hasn't come yet. Because I still work at that station. I'm still part of the signal. And the thing that lives in the frequency, the thing that answered our broadcast all those years ago, has patience beyond human understanding. It can wait. Every Christmas Eve, I stay home. I lock my doors. I keep my family close. And I don't turn on the radio. Because I know that somewhere up on that hill, in that cinder block building surrounded by forest and snow, the transmitter is humming, broadcasting into the darkness, waiting for someone to answer. And someday, maybe this year, or maybe 10 years from now, my phone will ring at 3 a.m, and I'll pick it up even though I know better, even though I know what's coming. And a calm voice will say, "Hello, Nathan. I wanted you to know how you're going to die.